and then screen share. Okay, so today this is going to be SMN, Scientific Medical Network, Paradigm Explorer, once monthly London group, one-off doing it online, and Joe Bartholomew will be doing the talk. Who's a psychotherapist and editor, events organiser, writer, poet, arts critic, and other things as well. And where is it? Then screen share. And I'll go there, and then you click on screen share. Screen. Oh yeah, and then Tom, how do you get the thing up? More. Does anyone know how to bring up your PowerPoint? Is anyone any good with PowerPoints?
You have to have it open, and then when you screen share, you pick what part of your computer you want to share.
Oh, so you open. Oh, okay. So I'm going to do that first. Okay, thanks. There. You do it there. Get the word the. Articles. Oh, there it is there. So click on the PowerPoint, open it, and then once open, I'll share. That's it. So share PowerPoint presentation. Sorry, something is preventing us from sharing at this time. Please try again later. PowerPoint.
Well, yeah, you don't have to, because that's going to have you share it to send it to somebody. You just want to open it.
Okay, so I've opened it at the moment, and then do I click file or your screen sharing?
Well, we can see it.
We can see it. We can see it. You just have to
Oh, you can see
make
PowerPoint.
it whatever. Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so what does it say? Can you see the first part? Can you see where it says
We can.
a radical?
see it.
So it says a radical revisioning.
Yep, we see it.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so I'll do that. Okay, just get that little box out of the way.
You can't see it yourself.
Oh, yeah, I can see it now. I just got to move this out the way. What's that? Yeah, okay. So now I can do it. Okay, and then I'll just put it up here. Okay, slide. Slide. You can see that's right. So then
Just click slideshow at the top.
slideshow. Oh, there it is. Oh, it's oh. It's a slideshow. Oh, here it is. I've got it. Brilliant. Okay. So hi
Hold
everyone.
on, go. You'll need to, as you're the host, you'll need to let people in case they're waiting.
Is there anyone who's come in?
Well, it'll say on your screen if you need to admit somebody.
Oh, okay. Got you. Thanks. I was at the top. Okay. Thanks. Okay. So so this is going to be my talk on a radical revisioning of psycho-spiritual breakdown to breakthrough. So sort of challenging some of the views on having breakdowns and being transformed by them, like the common sort of western-centric transpersonal perspectives, like Groff, Jung, and maybe even a bit of Jorge Ferrer, trying to expand on his transpersonal perspective. And next slide. How do I get the next slide up? Ah, okay. Okay, so here, firstly, with my quote here, is that madness need not be all breakdown. It may also be breakthrough. It is potential liberation and renewal, as well as enslavement and existential death. And that was from R.D. Laing, who was a British psychiatrist who challenged a lot of the practices and methods in British psychiatry and across the Western world, even in places like the US, and like, you know, to be present with the person and what they're experiencing, and that madness or psychosis can actually have meaning to it, existential meaning and purpose. And it's not just a load of nonsense that's disordered and confusing and rubbish that you just need to just put out the way and just throw it away as if it's just useless. It's actually got something really rich and important, and it's associated with symbolic meaning around trauma and distress, and also societal and political and cultural violence on a collective level, which he sort of touched on, but I don't think he expanded on it. But I think Gabor Mate, in one of his recent books that he's released like on, I think he released it last month, and he did it at Drop the Disorder, the conference on challenging mental health practices and theory in the UK, and that was looking at in a broader way of what Laing was doing earlier in the 20th century. That's Gabor Mate, and I think it's something to do with like mad to be more normal, or mad living in a mad society. And he was sort of expanding that on a political, cultural, and social level, not just an individual level that R.D. Laing was doing. That's worth checking out. Okay. And so basically, with breakdown, is like is defined as a life crisis. So we've got like a more sort of generic sort of view of like mental breakdown, that someone is under a lot of stress, pressure, and emotionally they just can't handle it, and they just break down, and they don't go to work, and they just struggle, and they have like a sort of life crisis, and they don't really know what's going on. There's a lack of clarity around this with this term mental breakdown, around what the meaning is, or what's really happening. It's quite foggy, that kind of language, but it's quite like a general term that's used in the UK. And then we talk about like an existential breakdown, which probably relates more to someone like Emmy Van Duzen's work in existential therapy and existential psychology. And this looks at it more in terms of like your philosophical worldview and belief system, that some things conflicting with what you believe, what you believe is right and wrong, what you believe is the purpose and meaning of your life, what society providing for us in terms of social provisions. Should we have more liberty? Should there be more? Should we need to have more social responsibility? And a lot of conflicts around this belief system can really really make people very stressed and make them feel that life's not meaningful. Like when we talk about like nihilism, that all like morals are baseless and valueless, lives without intrinsic meaning, just whole apathy, when your whole belief system just breaks down, that your relationships aren't working anymore, your job 9 to 5 isn't working, and then you've got to almost like reflect and think more through, think these things through more critically about what's meaningful to you, what's purposeful to you, and what are your values, like almost trying to reevaluate what your value and belief system is. So then you can have a stronger foundational structure of who you are, and what the purpose of your life is, and what your relationship is to other people, and maybe like discover a vocation or a calling rather than just a profession or a sort of 9 to 5 job. And then there's like a spiritual crisis that's more associated with like organisations like Emerging Proud in the UK, as directed by Katie Mottram, who had her own lived experience of a spiritual crisis and breakdown. And then there's people like Isabel Clarke, who one of the directors of Spiritual Crisis Network in the UK, and this looks at like non-ordinary states of consciousness, and how when a lot of trauma or pressure can bubble up and come into conscious awareness, and then it can be a lot of the trauma can come out symbolically, like in terms of hearing voices, seeing things in terms of imagery, visions, then also like you can have language, like you can have like the language can become what I think it was Margaret Warner called metafact processing. So it's almost like facts and metaphors can be jumbled or integrated in a way that sort of processes of meaning, like what's called like implicational meaning or propositional meaning, in terms of cognitive functioning, can become blurred or mixed, or actually more integrated, and then by validating those processes or that experience, the person can actually become more grounded and more stable, and process that therapeutically, rather than shutting down the experience through drugs or through sectioning. And then also when we talk about breakthrough, that's what I was just describing, is about how we can work through the process. So like when I was saying about stabilizing, like people might feel the need to have like family around them, have like maybe like a mental health interdisciplinary support team, like with like a psychiatrist, psychologist, psychiatric nurse, occupational therapist, social worker, to help them and sort of dialogue and support that person with their family or friends, help them work through that process. And then this can lead to like a change in who the person is, how they live their life, their belief system, their relationships, and then like looking at, like, in terms of, like, I think they're called the givens in existential philosophy, like the givens of like choice, responsibility, freedom, meaning, purpose. These are all sort of really important givens in life, because that's what makes up life of being human. So if we sort of validate these values or virtues, it can be really empowering for the person, and it can help them find meaning through the suffering. So like when you think about, there's a writer called Viktor Frankl, and he had an experience of living in a concentration camp, and he discovered that the people who survived in the concentration camp, who were Jewish prisoners, they could find existential meaning in the little things in life, and that could keep them going. Whereas the people who couldn't find meaning in their day-to-day activities would give up and perish and die almost, or some die and give up on living. And then he created a philosophy out of that called logotherapy. And then what I want to talk about today is how we can look at existential, like a breakdown and a breakthrough, but revise a perspective in terms of looking at it more critically, and also in terms of bringing consciousness into it as a consciousness-based process, an experiential process. Okay. And so first, I just wanted to say about, like, well, what is a worldview or belief value system in terms of when someone has a breakdown? So it can have something to do with, like, you know, what does it mean to be, what's your belief about what it means to be human? Like, are humans supposed to be like rational? Is it human? You're a man, you're a male, you're white, wealthy, highly educated, cultured, and this can be like a standard, almost Western, almost an heritage from like imperialist and colonial empires, to help validate their worldview and belief system, and see and create an us and them belief system that can lead to exploitation and colonialism, to take privilege and entitlement from other countries and continents in the world. And this seems to be something that's developed philosophically from ancient Greece and Rome, and that's developed for hundreds of years. That's been consolidated in what's called modernity, like modern world, in terms of like rational materialism and positive empiricism and things like that. And then also with your belief system, like, what is the purpose in your life? Like, you might feel like you've got a profession, a big house, and a car, a wife, 2 children, and basically you've got it all, and that's sort of a steady, sort of stable thing, as long as nothing conflicts or challenges that in a conflicted way. Like if you want to have, like, I don't know, you might want to sort of not have a big house, you might want to sort of move around, travel, you might not want to have children, you might be gay, you might not be heterosexual, you might not want, there could be all these other things that question and challenge that sort of conventional belief system and worldview. And also, like, looking at things with like good and evil, like what's good, I'm a good person, I sort of don't break any laws. I pay my bills, I pay my taxes, and anyone who doesn't is evil or they're bad or immoral. And as long as I stay in that conventional morality, then my belief system feels pretty stable and safe. Okay, and then I wanted to talk about after talking about a worldview, I wanted to talk more about what I'd call an aesthetics of Britishness, and how this relates to like imperialist and colonial identities. Like I was just saying earlier about how our belief system and worldview in the West has been conditioned by a lot of colonial and imperialist factors, and this was believed by like existentialists and Dadaists and surrealist artists that basically everything to do with Western culture and tradition, culturally and socially and politically, it wasn't working anymore. And that's why we had 2 world wars, because it was untenable what we were trying to do. And it just led to wars and us and them, fights and oppositional conflicts. And then, like, for example, things that represented that, in my view, is things like romantic idealism. So like you'd get things like to do with like poetry or the arts, which would like deny or reject like experiential based realism. So it'd be quite idealistic and like see the best and the good and the beautiful, but not look at any of the darker things in life, like to do with violence, to do with like poverty, crime, like the sort of things that are sort of hidden. And invite a few people, and also like rational materialism. Like, did this really work with Karl Marx? Like, are we just our manual labor? And is this and if we are just our manual labor, like in terms of living in a capitalist society, that all we can do is work and earn a wage for our labor that we're contributing, is it too painful to bring into awareness of class consciousness? Because in Britain, in my view, there doesn't seem to be anything that we could regard as a working class consciousness. And what we have is like everyone, in my view, wants to believe that we're all middle class privileged now, where really there's actually more nuance to class structure. And we even have like what's called a precariat. I remember a writer was saying about that is actually like an underclass of the working. And then we've got like lower middle class, upper middle class, and we've got the upper classes. So there's so much going on there in terms of power and dynamics and influence across society. And then we've got rational positivism as well, like in terms of this sort of worldview. And like, for example, it proposes that only what can be rationally argued or evidenced through measurement is of value. And then like we've got like in the arts, illustration is of value rather than expressing. So like it's more like the arts of like valuing photography, like illustration, rather than the intensity of those emotional sensations. And also when we look at like what I call an aesthetics of British identity, informed by imperialist and colonialist agendas and identities and context, is that we look at things like X Factor and Britain's Got Talent, and like for example, it's very much like the romantic idealism I mentioned earlier, that it looks at like everything that's very rose tinted glasses, and it doesn't look at like the realism that's more experientially based. And then also like we've got manufactured pop, like for example in our culture, like around like Spice Girls and like take that, they're like boy bands and girl bands, but it's not genuine. It's not genuine class consciousness or gender consciousness. It's very artificial and insincere. It's like acting. And then we've got things like and then we've got other things like I mentioned, like Big Brother, like how we sort of perceive the world and see things within our British worldview. You got things like Hugh Grant, who's very much like in his romantic sort of films. It's all about social etiquette and social custom. He gets really nervous and anxious trying to do the right thing, and all that kind of thing. And then I wanted to talk about what I'd call an aesthetics of internationalism, and how this is inclusive of like the accident and the sublime in terms of ontologies. So like in contrast to what I would say is an aesthetics to do with how you experience life, like how you experience it. It's in terms of British nationalism, a contrasting view. Internationalism is how we can break down these sort of constricted and oppressive belief systems and values and ideas. So, for example, I was very interested in like Charles Baudelaire, who's he published the book in the 19th century, the Flowers of Evil. And so basically what he was doing is he was challenging traditional poetry as more romantic and idealized and rose-colored tinted about the beauty of life and nature, and that there's actually a darker component. So he was looking at all the things that was like taboo within French culture and French society, and he's bringing that into the open. So like more about the fallibility and the darkness of human nature. And then we see that he was a leader in symbolism. So basically, instead of taking things literally, he would symbolize things through his poetry. And then you'd notice, like, for example, another symbolist poet who came out from France was Arthur Rimbaud. And he was a teenager poet. And he sort of represented a lot of the teenage angst around the time in France. And you can sort of see that this shift around poetry from romantic idealism to modern realism, you can see that basically this actually had a real shift on the British 20th century culture, like the counterculture movement, when you've got like the hippies, and you've got like the Beat Generation, and then you know like rock and roll starts coming about. So you can really see this real emphasis on authenticity and being congruent in your state of being and what you're communicating, and not just saying what's nice and polite and what's respectable, civilized. And what was really amazing with Baudelaire is within his work, he'd explore what he'd call the spleen. So the spleen was like something that's more authentic and genuine, like a life force. And I sort of see it quite like it's almost like about like what the Gnostics would call the demiurge. And the demiurge is more like a process, or it would seem something like that was almost like evil or demonic. And also there's something that Winnicott, who was a child psychologist in the 20th century, a psychoanalyst, he talked about children who would sort of get involved in crime and criminal offences. He'd talk about that they'd have access to what's called an antisocial tendency. And he regarded this energy or life force that Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher, called the will to power. It's a life drive. But it actually is Winnicott saw it as that it's a sign of hope. That if you can actually help facilitate this process as an organic experiential process of unfoldment, it can actually lead to something that's healing and transformative and good. And that if we shift and align with this process, miraculous things can happen. And then also later on in the 19th century, you have like the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche who explored this dichotomy about of energies, like in terms of like romantic idealism. He saw it more in terms of what we call Polynesian energies or hermeneutics. Like he'd contextualize experience, or the Western history of philosophy and culture was all about how we can contextualize experience in a calm, controlled, civilized way. And Apollo was one of the Greek gods as an archetype that Nietzsche drew inspiration from. And then also he'd say there's also another really important contextualized energy and way of experiencing life, and that was represented by the Greek god Dionysius. And he represented more intoxicated wild energies that were more uncontrolled and spontaneous. And he said that we needed to bring that more back into our civilization, in Western civilization, and sort of try to integrate the two as a new state of consciousness that he called the overman or the supermensch. That man, this limitation of Western culture, was something that we needed to overcome. It was actually a limitation that was holding us back. And then I've observed, like, for example, in historical movements in the 20th century, like Dadaism seems to like be an anti-art movement that sort of challenges all these sort of delusive phenomena, these beliefs or false beliefs that don't work for people anymore, from like which has come from the heritage of like Western Greco-Roman culture and Christianity, and like influenced by the state and the government and bureaucracy. And then also there's a later movement that came up just after, a few years after, I think, Dadaism, called surrealism. So it was like deconstructing and dismantling what it meant to be human in terms of philosophical beliefs and cultural beliefs within society, and actually saying, well, how do we bring in the irrational? What is irrational? Because we've been so contained and controlled within rational thinking and living. How do we bring in the irrational energies and feelings and emotions and sensations, and also the imaginative, like what's something that's beyond like reality, what's beyond the actual, like how can we envision something greater than ourselves creatively? And then I've noticed, like in music, when we had rock and roll, that's really challenged like social constraints and boundaries and rules. And then we've got things like punk rock that reminds me a lot of Dadaism, like it's trying to sort of dismantle and deconstruct a lot of things that oppress and limit people. And then a bit later on, from the 1970s punk rock, you've got like 80s and 90s sort of indie art rock, like surrealist art, I'd say, art rock, where they're sort of looking at different ways of like doing different guitar tunings and experimenting more with music, sort of like bands like the Pixies, like having different genres, and like Dinosaur Jr. looking at country, metal, punk rock, trying to integrate it and break down these divisions between different communities and different ways of self-expression. And then later we've got like the grunge movement, which is sort of a integration of like the punk rock scene and then the metal scene, and trying to bridging them together to create new states of consciousness. And one of the videos I wanted to sort of show, I couldn't figure out how to do it, was a band called Placebo of the 1990s. And they sort of looked at like punk rock and sort of art, sort of indie art rock, and they were trying to sort of do something quite unusual and sort of and express something to do with transgender, non-binary consciousness. So some of the music, they're sort of doing these unusual tunings to sort of express these sort of non-ordinary states, and it's trying to sort of reconcile the feminine and masculine through the music they're making, which I just thought was incredible, because I think it was 1995 they released a song called Nancy Boy, and that sort of challenged a lot of stereotypes about gender and binary issues. And in my view, if we believe in things to do with transpersonal psychology and therapy and consciousness, a lot is involved with transformation. It's actually breaking down binaries, like between like male, female, rational, irrational, civilized, uncivilized, like breaking down all these different things that limit us and separate us, so then we can actually create new syntheses and ideas and innovations and bring people together and have a wider and broader community. That creates an aesthetics of internationalism, rather than just being stuck in one idea, one belief system, that one national worldview that basically doesn't serve us and just separates and divides people, rather than connects and develops community. And then I just wanted to say something before sort of ending. It's like basically about how in the Western world there's this belief that transpersonal psychology and therapy is that it's something rare that you can achieve in terms of what's called cosmic consciousness. So when your ego sort of breaks down, or you let go of your ego, and you experience higher states of consciousness, of interconnectivity and unity with yourself and the universe. But like, and then that's like a rare thing that someone can achieve as an individual in the West. However, my understanding is that, like, when we go to talk to people in Africa, that they talk about they don't talk about an individual self that's separate from other people. They talk about what's called Ubuntu, which in my understanding is that's self through others. So basically, to actually participate and live your life, you're interconnected with everybody. So it's actually something that you've already got here in life already. And it's actually becoming aware of that and actually amplifying it and picking up on the signs and hunches and moments of connection and draw into them. And it might not be rationally based. It might be like a coincidence or a tension in your body or a Freudian slip or an image that comes to your mind, and seeing if you can facilitate that and break down those boundaries. And that's more like a sort of integrative sort of integral consciousness, that it's looking at like your body, your emotions, feelings, and your intuition, as well as your mind, and how you can actually use them in an interconnected way to actually engage with the world in a more participatory way. And George Ferrer was a transpersonal psychologist of the early 21st century that put forward a new participatory vision that, in my view, resonates a lot with Ubuntu in Africa, in how they understand like self through others, through participating with community, that we're all connected. And he was like doing a lot of challenges towards individualism, and also like doing a lot of transpersonal psychology based on research rather than, well, wait a minute, what we experience in spiritual experiences and what we gain from that is how is that informing the way we live? How is that actually helping to like liberate other people or communities or parts of the world or the natural world? Like what's the moral obligation that we need to participate and actually get involved, rather than just detaching and just focus on our own individual self-development and growth and detaching from everybody else as if that doesn't matter, which kind of seems contradictory. And I almost thought that the reason I said it's almost like a lie, this view, Western view of like cosmic consciousness that you can reach if you're a rare individual of spiritual giftedness, because it almost lets everyone off the hook of actually creating community and actually participating and interacting and relating to people in really profound, loving and caring ways. That's reciprocal and mutual. And then I wanted to say something about, like, I've noticed also Mick Cooper and John McLeod, they've been looking at therapies to do with pluralism in practice. So looking at the validating difference and diversity of experience and like creating an ethical framework within the psychotherapy and counselling approaches and in psychology and counselling psychology in Britain, which started off in Scotland. I think that they did that was the first counselling psychology program. Mick Cooper, he founded that in the UK in Scotland, and then now he's doing stuff in London in Roehampton University. And then there's a lot of affinities between counselling psychology in Britain and pluralistic therapy, which is not always addressed and looked at, which is really good, I think, because it sort of challenges like psychology and therapy schoolism, where they all have their own sort of like humanistic psychology, psychodynamic psychology, cognitive psychology or therapy. And they said this is the right way, this is the right path, like sort of universalism or like perennialist views, that they're all the same or our way is the right way. Whereas pluralism looks like, well, that is kind of true, but then there's also like difference of and what's specific to that person, what's relevant to them, how can we guide it in terms of what's important to their needs and what their goals are. And then also there's someone else I like as well, like Sumita Basu and Devashi Banerjee's work, and they look at integral yoga that basically integrates 4 or 5 of the major Indian paths of self-realization through the practice of yoga and integrating those together, like I was talking about, like an integral approach. And then Sumitra Basu's developing a consciousness-based psychology based on that philosophy, that he plans to publish a book over this year or next year with a colleague of his called Michael Mikovic, who's an American psychiatrist, and Sumitra Basu's a psychiatrist in southern India, which is very exciting. And then another related work is work of Lewis Malmadrona, who's been developing an approach called two-eyed seeing that looks at like the Western medical model and then also an indigenous spiritual model in terms of psychology, healing and medicine, and how you can sort of navigate the two. It's not like one or the other. So it looks at it in more pluralistic and more integral perspectives. And then literally, I don't know if I've got time, but then I was like very interested in terms of a revision of transpersonal psychology and in terms of crisis and breakthrough. And like I thought it's very important. I thought what I described as a new language that we need, that we're missing in spiritual breakdowns and breakthrough, like what I define as like a phenomenology of petrification, where a person is so stunned or traumatized that they can't put words or language to what they're experiencing. And then in my view, there's something more to do with like semiotics, which is to do with the study of signs, that people will communicate to you through sensations or expressions, but it won't be necessarily verbal or conceptual in terms of linguistic or language. And then something like to do with the knowledge of alienation is something that's not such a deeply troubled, like distressing, traumatic state of consciousness. It's more to do with consensual trance, I'd say, ordinary reality, that we're almost like we're living a role or acting a way, but we feel disconnected. We don't feel quite like we're living a meaningful person, but it just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't, we feel just detached. And then I wanted to define like another state, another sort of state of being and becoming in the world. And that was what I define as congruence. That, you know, with Carl Rogers' humanistic psychology, he talks about if you're congruent in what you feel inside and you're expressing that in your life, you become more harmonized and integrated within yourself. And I noticed that when generally in therapy, that's what people reach, is a state of consciousness when they're no longer conflict between what they believe and how they live their life. But then what I noticed that he only went so far in becoming like what he described as becoming a fully functioning person. He didn't go into a transpersonal plane, and which I wanted to describe in terms of a language of a phenomenology of liberation, alchemy, and transformation. So this looks at more like non-ordinary states of consciousness and actually going above and beyond what's congruent, and actually having more trust and faith in a process that's emerging, an experiential process of a consciousness force that's within you, and aligning with that sort of individual will and a collective or group will, and seeing what feels right in terms of it's almost like creating new syntheses and making connections and relatedness, that is almost ineffable, what's actually happening and just indescribable. And I think that's probably an overview of my talk, and was interesting. And I was wondering, as I was finished, like if anyone had any questions or any like their own lived experiences, that anything that resonated with them in terms of the presentation, any ideas that or things that didn't make sense or that interested them. Thanks. So for example, is there anyone who's had any experience of like a crisis, like a breakdown, or worked with people in crisis, and have you found that is there any certain things that have been particularly difficult to deal with, or there isn't a language or a practice or method that's been effective, and what have you found? Has there been other things that have been effective that like maybe isn't in the mainstream mental health care system or in therapeutic training or medical training and practice? Yeah. Let me know if I've gone completely over your head. And I don't know if I've just gone spontaneous prose and just expressed everything. And maybe everyone's
I guess
shared.
I'll just share that I'm in Kodiak, Alaska, and what I just wrote my dissertation on was holistic health and healing, individual holistic health and community wellness. And what it was for the conclusion was that connecting back to the Aleutic core values, which, as you pointed out, talks about what is the relationship that an individual has to the members of their community, their land, their spiritual beliefs, their nature. All of those connections and relationships are talked about, are emphasized in their core values. And when you look at the core values of all the indigenous native groups throughout Alaska, they have very similar core values. And so when they talked about what was holistic health, they could all be taken back to following one of the core values that they've respected and honored throughout their whole culture. So connecting to the core values was a way for them to be holistically healthy. Maintaining those relationships was a way for their community to be healthy. Maintaining those core values was the way to impact positively holistic health. And when that wasn't done, it impacted, holistic health for the universe in a negative way. But when it was done, it had a connecting value for everyone, locally as well as globally.
Brilliant. I completely agree with that. That sounds amazing. And that's what I was trying to describe, or with my own frustrations or problems in my own life or working life, is in the UK, there's a lot of things that are constructed or put in the way of everything you're saying. And I feel like a lot of people in Britain almost feel like with like non-directive therapies or humanistic therapies, transpersonal therapies, they're almost like, but if you just follow the process and you be empathetic and not judge, then things will just magically work. And maybe in those indigenous communities, that's true, that it can happen, because if you've got that freedom to express that. But if you've got all these sort of like mental constructs or conditionings that restrict people, in my view, it imposes or restricts or blocks or pushes aside that process, that healing or consciousness-based process come into light, like bringing light to the darkness. And I wanted to really put across, like, how can we deconstruct and dismantle these things that are creating a problem by raising critical consciousness, and then by becoming aware of it, then you become like a collective consciousness that can actually go beyond it. If we're really willing to sort of experience what's going on and hold in that sense of ambivalence, like, so I was wondering if, like, something like with Lewis's work, Lewis Jerome's work, in terms of two-eyed seeing, there's that capacity to, like, it's almost like was it Scott Fitzgerald said, like, the sign of a first-rate mind is about to hold two different or conflicting ideas at the same time. So if we think about the medical model and we think about the indigenous experience, if we can hold both ideas or experiences or perspectives together, we can create something new. Like, almost like with when you get like surrealist art, like how you can bring the imaginal and the actual together and actually gain new insights and discoveries in science, technology, and medicine.
Yeah, and that's what they talked about, was that their cultural revitalization efforts was the mechanism for healing. And, it's gone back years when they allow the indigenous members of the community to actually be the healers themselves. And so what you were talking about, these Western conscripts of having what therapy is, that they go berry picking, they go beachcombing, they do beading, they do, that's the therapeutic process. Not
I've heard
having
that in Africa as well. I've heard that in Uganda with a friend of mine. You're so right. I've heard that as well. It's so true. Sorry if I'm interrupting. I'm just a bit excited, like, hearing what you're saying. I just resonate with what you're saying. It's almost like saying about
don't meet in the office at 2 o'clock. Let's go berry picking together. Let's come over and let's bead together. That's the therapeutic session.
wow. Because what's really interesting you saying that is actually what's John McLeod from who's one of the founders of pluralistic therapy in the UK. He's an individualistic person. He was almost like, well, I don't have to get into trouble for saying it, but like, I'm sure he said at one conference or something that like we could almost, why don't we just almost do away with therapy in an office, and like you can just go out and meet someone and chat, and that could be the therapy, and do things outside, and why does there have to be a time limit? It's all these rules and constructs. It's like, do we really need it? So it's almost like his own work almost seemed like a process of almost like going through all the history and research and theory of and practice of counselling, and then almost letting it all go and just being with the community, just being community orientated rather than individualistic, western centric with things, putting things into a box. And there was almost saying I wanted to break down about like cosmic consciousness, because we talk about that like with psychedelic research in the UK and like being one with the cosmos, and it's all very grandiose and very like, wow, this is incredible. I've been touched by God almost. And then it's almost, and then they go back to their 9-to-5 job and then carry on as if that never happened. And my understanding with more indigenous cultures is that you begin with the community, you begin with that interconnectedness, and you keep amplifying it and developing it in a grounded way, not in an ungrounded way. That obviously I think psychedelic medication and drugs can actually help facilitate something or give someone an insight, but it shouldn't be like the be all and the end all. And that sort of comes back to like Jorge Ferrer with his work on the participatory vision of transpersonal psychology, like what is this wisdom or knowledge that you've gained, and how you can actually bring it into the world to help your family, your community, and society, and the natural world. I'm almost wondering if Jerry's there, if she could get involved. I keep thinking of Jerry from Soul Foundation in
Yes,
in Uganda.
yes, I'm here, and I actually want to say something. I've been, first of all, when you speak about the lady who just spoke about the berry picking together, it reminds me, and also I think it's Yusuf from here in Uganda who talks about a program like that. It reminds me of a lot of parents in Uganda now who say our children are very different from who we were. Our children are very easily like they're almost weak, like, you know, all of them are suffering from some sort of mental health disorders, depression or anxiety or whatever, and they're wondering why. And I often say to them that when we were being raised, we did a lot of chores. We went out to do the equivalent of berry picking, be it mangoes. In fact, we were kicked out of the house.
And that's what's so interesting, Jerry. So I'm interrupted, but yeah. I just thought to myself, there's actually a really famous psychoanalyst who worked with Sigmund Freud. So he's like the sort of father of modern psychology and psychotherapy. And his name was Alfred Adler. And he looked at things more in terms of like, instead of empathy, he had I think it's a German word for that meant social feeling. So basically, what a social feeling or social interest, you'd call it. And basically, if you want to be mentally well and have good well-being, you follow that social interest. And he said, in terms of what you said about working, he said that the thing that he would say to people if they had a mental health problem or difficulty, he'd say to them, think of one thing you can do that someone would like you to do for them. And then so you can almost see like how that would take it off that person's mind, where they're so self-focused on their own distress and suffering, that by helping someone else, that they're contributing and doing something meaningful, and then you become reconnected with the community, and then you end up working or doing a vocation or studying, and you're giving rather than just not really going anywhere.
Exactly. And for the younger people, even if you did not want to do the chore that you've been given, because you absolutely had to do it, eventually you have to finish it. So you're better off doing it and getting it out of the way, and then you go back to play. But what that allowed is that you always were able to break a cycle of a situation or misery or whatever you were feeling, because then you really get into, be it cleaning the house or tending to the garden or whatever.
You're being given a responsibility, like within the family, the community, that you're doing something.
So you get out of your head into whatever that activity is, and you break it. But also, I've been in the last few months and now days just trying to understand indigenous African culture, especially around spirituality and especially around ancestry, understanding what our relationship is with our ancestors. And it's really, really, really mind-blowing how much we actually relate or are in touch with our ancestors.
Incredible. It's incredible.
It's actually
I've only done it,
so
incredible.
superficially.
But you start unpacking it, like, wow, like you don't realize how much it informs the way we live our lives and the decisions we make and the way we do when we're on track or off track.
Absolutely. And for us, it's been demonized for so long that even listening to the terminology for the different levels of ancestors, it almost freaked me out in the beginning.
It's
because
incredible.
These are all words that are definitions of the devil himself, and yet they are actually just simply the names of ancestors. I've listened to West African teachers, I've listened to South African teachers, and only this week I have found Ugandan teachers. But the level of connection, I mean, it just makes me realize, I've always said that I believe that we are so in touch with spirits that come and connect with our spirits, but because we are so not aware, it's very easy for us to go off, on the negative side and start to connect with low vibrational energies and entities that then, cause us to be a certain way. But listening to some of these indigenous cultural, spiritual teachers, it's amazing that our ancestors, and it sounds like some of the healing workshops, the ancestral healing summits and workshops that I've attended, because that's where I started this whole practice. And in all honesty,
I was thinking, no, sorry if I'm interrupting you, Joe, but I was thinking, it sounded like with Margie, like it sounds a lot of what you're saying and what she's saying resonates a lot. Because I noticed that Margie was saying a few things that in the chat box that resonated a lot with the values and philosophy of indigenous cultures that you're talking about in Uganda, that she's connecting with in Canada. So I don't, there's some sort of way of you two dialoguing, and maybe I'll go in the background and maybe other people wanted to get involved in the discussion. If anyone else had anything to add.
Yeah.
I think I resonate a lot, because also I feel like when we don't look at our history and our ancestors, it's almost implying that all we have is the present, and then that almost makes a person feel they're independent and they don't have any accountability or responsibility in terms of their community or where they come from, or any sense of belonging almost. Because by knowing what your ancestry is and what your family heritage is, you has
Joe,
a vocation informed by that. Sorry.
Yeah, and a lot of what these teachers are saying is that many times the ancestors that connect to us are trying to get us to do something that
that's so true.
Are supposed to either heal, and sometimes when we are not acting, they sort of keep nudging us, and that is what comes off as anxiety, because out of the blue.
And that's what I wanted to say about I wanted to say about the sublime and the accident, like an ontology. Like, ontology is like a way of being in the world. So I wanted to say like an ontology of the accident and the ontology of the sublime. Like if the ancestors try to knock on our door or sort of provoke us, like through accidents or through like an amazing experience of like that just takes our breath away, that transforms our consciousness and it takes us in another direction. We're like, it's like John Lennon, the singer-songwriter of the Beatles, said, life is what happens to us when we're making other plans. And what you're talking about is that like the ancestors are trying to shake us up, to actually say, wait a minute, you're going in the wrong way, or you're off track. I'm trying to help you out here. I'm not causing a problem. Don't ignore me. It's just going to get bigger and bigger because the more disharmony you're entering, the more you're going to suffer and be unhappy. So it's better to just let go and trust it, because it's all about an organic process of nature that brings everyone together, and it makes you more loving, compassionate, forgiving, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, so it's so fascinating. So I'm still learning.
Could you say, I don't know if you could say about yourself to everyone, because it's recording at the moment, and there's a few, like they're generally amazing people who join these groups and these discussions, and like if you could say something about yourself, like and what you do at Soul Family, just so we can resonate.
Yeah, so I'm a Zumba instructor out here in Uganda, and I decided
have your photo as well,
on...
Jerry. Sorry, is that going to be your photo?
Oh, thank you.
Sorry, I just want to be more connected. I think you're an amazing person, and you've got so much to offer.
Thank you. So then I went out one day to do dance. I requested to dance at the National Referral Mental Hospital with the people who are suffering from addiction, because I thought, they pick up their vice from bars and nightclubs, so they will enjoy the music that we're dancing to, and they needed the workout. Instead, the hospital said I should dance with the other patients, like the really quote unquote mad patients, and we went back and forth. In the end, we struck a compromise to dance with the two parties. And from that day in 2017, March of 2017, my life completely transformed, because it was such an amazing class. We kept going back every month, and we then got a very unique perspective of mental health challenges, because we were not practitioners. We were not coming from a place where we have been sick before. It was just, so it allowed us to speak to the patients from a completely, unjudgmental place. Initially, we were judging them, but then that judgment wore off. We spoke to their families, because every time we went to hospital, they would beg to use our phones to call their families. Then after the phone call, because of the way the families would sort of brush them off, I would call the family member again, explain who I was, and just kind of engage them and let them know that it's okay for them to tell me how frustrated they are, and so on and so forth.
And what it sounds like, Jerry, it sounds like an approach that was pioneered in America, in the US, and it was called Soteria House, and it was basically for people who had like great mental health breakdowns or crisis. They would go to this residential home with support workers, but they were people who were non-professionals, and their role was just basically to listen and be empathic. And there's like a sort of statement or quote from their approach. It was like they called it being with rather than doing to. So you wouldn't give any advice or get professionals involved, or if there was any, and just help that person just be validated, or whatever their experience is, just be with them and understand it and value their being, who they are, without judging them, and then miraculous things can happen. And what's really interesting is that I think, I don't know if Margie could add something to it, because I don't know if she works with Lewis Malmadrona, I think, in some respects, I think, who established the Coyote Institute, which is doing like indigenous medicine, therapy, and healing, and also brings in the Western model. And he's actually, I don't know if he's established it yet, Margie might know better than me, that he's actually trying to establish, or has established, a Soterious house or center, but bringing in indigenous like cultural identity and beliefs and practices. He's bridging the two, like the Western model of what you're saying, like with being with people and not actually just having the expertise and doing something out of a book or through the medical manual. It's actually being with the person at the same time and actually bringing in their culture and their background and the community and integrating it all. And it sounds like you're doing that. You're like a pioneer. You're leading that in Uganda at the moment. And it sounds like someone like Lewis he's developed over several decades in this work in North America, in Boston, I think, in the US, near the Canadian border. So imagine that's might be the link with Marjorie, where she's in Canada, and there's that bridge between the US and on the main in Boston, and then she's in Alaska, I think, in Canada, and then it's like seeing how you can bridge those differences. And it sounds like you're doing it amazing what you're actually doing. You're actually breaking through in Uganda. You're actually the pioneer that's revolutionizing. You're transforming Africa. It sounds to me what you're doing. And by linking in with people like Margie and Lewis, I think they really empower you and really encourage all the work you're doing, because it sounds like what you're doing in Uganda just is incredible.
Thank you.
I was in the
you
US.
Really speak nicely. You really speak nicely about me and what I do.
I can just see what you're doing. You're making these steps, these pioneering steps. I can see it.
Yes, exactly. It's the beginning, really. And so any help would be very, very welcome.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone could add anything to that. I don't know if I'm going to be a bit bossy and say, like, Marty, is there something you could say to Jerry or not? I don't know, because I can be quite a dominating, loud force. So I don't know if I need to step back or something. Like, Jeff needs to tell me to tone down and let other people speak. Is there anyone there? Jeff, is there, Jeff?
Hello, can I say something?
Yeah, sure. Oh, Johnny.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about like what to say after all that you have said. Like, so maybe one thing is like if you are blessed with like a breakdown, like a breakthrough, all that you was talking about kind of falls away. All the ideas, all the concept, everything.
Yeah.
Just it's like you take all your clothes off and you are just naked, like born
Definitely.
again. Going down to zero, going below zero, and then coming up again, clean.
Amazing,
Totally.
amazing. And I think it's probably said. I don't know if I'm going through a sort of breakthrough at the moment with things, and I might be actually leaving the country and doing a whole new job, marrying or being the love of my life, and all this crazy stuff is happening. And I'm just following, and all my beliefs and everything about my job and doing what I normally do, it's all just breaking down, falling down. And all this amazing stuff's happening. Some people think, Joe, you're crazy, you're mad, what are you doing? Don't do it. And some things are like, and if people sort of invalidate me, I sort of get a bit confused, a bit paranoid, persecuted. But overall, if I'm in a safe space, all this amazing stuff happens, like what you're saying, Johnny, like 100%.
Yeah. So I just like I'm here tonight because I kind of the headline in the invitation, like what you talked about, is like something else than the headline, I feel. So I was waiting for the breakdown and the breakthrough, and I'm thinking like all over the world, like everywhere, we are people that are kind of breaking free in a way, like due to trauma, due to abuse, due to drugs, due to all those things, breaking down alone. So more than anything, we kind of need some sort of cyber soteria connection, where we can like come up again and be safe, like be together and feel safe.
It's really interesting you're saying that, Johnny, because I was actually getting I'll see if I've got the video for it. There's a guy called he's supposed to come today actually, but I think he's too busy. His name's Sperry Andrews, and he does his life's work is all about facilitating groups on unitive cosmic consciousness.
Okay.
So basically, and he does it online as well. So I'm going to try to talk to him about, could we do, like, if you're interested, if you want my email, and other people in the group as well, is actually we could get a once weekly, or I think once weekly, where we all attend on Zoom, and he'll help us to facilitate that process, and like how we can sort of drop everything and then we become connected, and we become almost like one organism. And because I feel that's almost like our birth or our actual nature. That's what we're supposed to be. We're not supposed to be separate individuals doing our own thing as if like we're not connected in any way. And it's finding those connections and inklings of how we're relatable.
Yeah.
Because there's a group. So basically, what you're saying about group, that basically, if you get the opportunity, because how did you find out about this talk? So I could put a link.
I'm a friend with you on Facebook, but maybe you don't know me.
Yeah. So what I do is I've got a group a radical culture group on social media, and also there's the Scientific Medical Network Facebook group. So I could put a post on there or message you directly on Facebook, like with a link to Sperry Andrews' work, because you're saying about like we're talking about it all sort of theoretically, and we're talking about our experiences. But then what we really need to do is something in practice that we can actually do, and then we can bring it into our own lives again.
Yeah. There are lots of those kind of activities going on already. So I think I'm into those. What you said to my neck already. Thank you. So, but like, yeah.
You're swamped in it. You're so absorbed that you're living and breathing every day. It's like, don't give me more. I've got enough as it is. I just want to express myself and say
Thank you.
So important. I want to share with the world. I'm living it. And if people could experience what I'm experiencing, it would change their lives and change the world. Like, maybe we need to listen to you, Johnny. Like, is there something you're doing? Like, could you give us some links or the sort of projects or what?
No, maybe just like wanting to say, well, like I have been kind of being at this process of growing up again for the last 7 years. Like had a really, like a heavy metal breakthrough. Like really feeling like I was sure I was going crazy, totally losing it. And step by step, like by listening inside and like looking outside for clues, for guidance, for direction, coming more and more into alignment with myself and with my what can I say, with the communities, or like the collective, like finding my place. And I think it's like it's just so important to recognize what can we say, like there are so it's so broad, but like
it's saying that's so meaningful to you that if it resonates with what you're feeling and it brings connection and community, if you follow that and trust it, you'll find your way. And it's not something rationally you do like, oh, I'm going to go out, I don't know, Google or look for a job or do it, and it's A, B, C, D, and E. It'll be something that you'll just gravitate to. It'll feel right, like, and it'll feel important. You won't know why, but then you go with it, and then all these different connections seem to happen because you trust it. And it brings more of yourself out, who you really are. Like the best of who you are isn't hidden anymore. You're not in a role. Yeah. You're being more authentic and more creative, and the best of who you are is just expanding, and it's just this really joyful, liberating experience. And you think, oh my God, like this is actually happening to me, and I've had it so hard and tough, and it's all that nonsense. It's all washed away now, and I can just let go of all the crap and all the shit of beating myself up and feeling guilty, and just go with it, and it doesn't matter anymore. It's not important, all the other stuff.
And it will go like in waves. Like, you have like a really good drive, and then it kind of you somehow lose the fuel.
Yeah. And sometimes people pathologize. I was saying this to somebody recently, like I'm getting a few arguments with people. It's like about they talk about you're being very manic or you're being like erratic, and I think it's almost like this energy. If it's very manic or very like you need to get it out. If you keep it in, it's like it's going to make you unwell and stressed and irritable. It's like life wanting to burst out of you, and it's somehow trying to go with that and sort of go with the flow, but not overdo it, not but sort of trust it, if that makes sense. Like what seems manic or seems a bit over the top to people, it's almost like you're breaking down boundaries in your own state of being, you know, in terms of like, it might be your sexuality or my sexuality or whatever, or like going out with people or women or men or just, I don't know, go bungee jumping. I don't know, just something, you just feel that urge to do something and it somehow liberates something that's trapped or stuck in you. Like you're sort of resolving those wounds or those sort of missing gaps in your life somehow. That's how I see it. It's almost like the things that need to be done or worked through. It's like a process. Almost you're enjoying it. You're in a really high place. But then something hits you. That's I'm a fallible person. Everything isn't great. I've still got to work on this sort of stuff as well as doing all the sort of fun stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Not that I'm the best at doing it necessarily.
It is rich. It is rich. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, John. It sounds like amazing. It's almost like really excited, like we're on a roller coaster together, and we're like, "Come on, let's go on the next ride, but let's not go on the roller coaster too much because we might burn ourselves out or get into trouble," sort of thing. Because it can be so liberating that you just want to break down all the boundaries and just, I don't know, just completely let go.
Yeah, I think it's maybe final from me. It's like something that really do what can I say, being a human being on earth and being oneself freely, like really not running away.
Really about Earth, it reminds me of the indigenous approach, like being located in your land. Being grounded in the earth, that you're part of nature, you're not separate from nature.
Yeah, and you can run away in your mind, and you can do damage to self and others, and so all the ways to bring you back to the land, I think is very helpful. Like to go, yeah.
That's something I find really hard to do actually, because I feel like when I go through these sort of bursts or creative or spiritual experiences or moments, I get really excited. I enjoy it. And I sort of I become ungrounded, and I can get into trouble, or people see me as being problematic, and it's almost like, how do I navigate that? Because almost like if I let go of that process, I feel that it's almost like, I don't know, I almost feel like I'm abusing myself or putting myself down or not being true to myself, like to keep that momentum, but then not, completely self-destructive, if that makes sense.
The energy is like limitless, and we have all the time in the world, like we have forever to use it. So there are no reason to panic in my sense. Like it's just step by step, like grounding, being human, being on the ground, receiving and giving. It's like
Receiving and giving. That's what I need to do more.
Yeah.
It's somehow using that energy in a receiving, giving way. That is how to make it more of a community function.
This is part of, isn't this part of you giving? Like this is like a community call right now. So you have brought us on here, and we are like jamming on the energy together.
Brilliant! I love that so much. Jamming. I had a jam 2 days ago in a bar, and I loved it completely. I loved it. And also sort of what did I do? I made a few challenges about the government and the monarchy, and people almost resonated with that as well. I'm not saying like there's anything wrong with them as people, but some of the political structures, I don't agree with, and I want them to sort of be dismantled. So I just feel it's almost like dismantling it, but then also doing it in a way where you connect more. It's not like you want to fight people or hurt people. I just want to connect with people. I just want to move that nonsense out of the way. Like you, Johnny, like you seem really open and really receptive, and you absorb a lot of feelings, emotions, and thoughts, and you've just got a lot to just flood out and give. And so many people just seem blocked with that. They're just very blocked. Yeah. And I just want to draw on that energy.
If you, what can we say? Like if you have exploded, then a lot of shit is gone. Yeah. And if you want to be with others like you are, they have to kind of explode. and they do
Mm.
not want to explode. Like
So
their
true.
safety is like in their mentality.
That's
So,
true.
and you have to step back to let them step forth.
That's
So
so true.
the closer you go toward, the more they will either fight you or they will back off.
Wow, you're like talking about my life now, Johnny. Like you're being like really intuitive. I was like, wow, there's almost
Yeah,
a little bit of psychic sort of telepathy. There's like you're gonna undress me soon, probably. And I'll be like, right, we're running out of time now. Let's finish this discussion.
yeah,
I
okay.
need to put my clothes back
Thank
on.
you.
Oh, that's okay, Johnny. You can. Thanks. I don't know if there's anybody else like wanting to share off, or I should turn my mic off or anything, because I can be really like gushing with energy. But Johnny's been fantastic. David Tennent, then I put Marg. I almost want to pull Margie. I'm like, come on, there's more there, Margie. There's more. There's more to show. I know it. There's more. And there's other people like Jeff Beck as well. Yeah, yeah, Margie. I think there's Margie, because I know there's so much more. Like, because Margie, I'm experiencing Margie is really humble and modest, and like there's like this, these other parallel, what's it, or universes or multiverse. Like, there's so many more different layers that Margie's got to offer. I can sense.
Well, I would like to add to what Geraldine said about connections to spirit and nature, because that's what started me on the path of trying to understand the difference between the indigenous epistemology worldview and the Western medical approach to health and holistic healing and all. And I did notice that the whole issue was related to the fact that they celebrated and recognized and discussed very commonly the spiritual connections that they had with each other, again, back to relationships. And so I created a diagram after doing those interviews, because that was another thing that was very different for me. You know, in a Western mindset, you come up with tables and very
Brilliant.
structured.
You're using a different language, a different
Yeah,
means of communication.
structured
What more
presentation.
right brain than left brain, sort of.
Yeah. So I came up with the diagram, and I can't share my screen, but imagine like a whirlpool or a whirlwind, like a tornado kind of a thing on a point. And so that is us. We're these little whirlwinds. And if we tip over, we knock other people over. And if we knock other people over, we're in the human realm. And so that impacts the natural realm, impacts the spiritual realm. All of the beings and entities in those other realms are also impacted. But if we can use the balancing from other people, then we can keep ourselves upright and help keep other people upright. Sorry, I was getting a phone call, and so
That's okay. It sounds like the universe is validating what you're saying and saying, yes, Margie, keep doing it, keep sharing and expressing this. You're completely on track. Like the ancestors are saying, come on, Margie, keep sharing this with us. Keep sharing.
Yeah, it's not my message. It's the message from the Alutiiq indigenous people here. That I have a friend. Here's a good example. I have a friend who, when the ravens start calling at her, she calls me because she says, I think you need to hear from me. The ravens are telling me to call you. And she's always right, because I always need to have that connection with her. And I need to hear her voice. I need to have that.
Do you need to call her now,
relationship.
do you? I'm almost wondering if like she's connecting with you now.
No, it's not her, but anyway, that's it.
I love that. I love that so much. And that's something I struggle with, that connection with, because I was trying to work out, because I was trying to think myself with indigenous communities, and also I was thinking about working class communities. Like, what is the difference between a Western working class community and an indigenous? And it sounds like what you're saying is it's to do with the land and with nature, and with and like with yourself and with Jerry around the ancestors, and getting those signs or messages that it isn't yours. You're channeling something. It seems like some of the most gifted people have this capacity to channel something, and then in the West we believe it's actually the person, the individual who's doing it. It's not. They're actually like a vehicle for something that's greater than themselves, like of a community or a national culture or an international culture, and it helps connect people together, and it nudges everything on different energetic frequencies. That's why why people like myself get so manic, because we're just absorbing it all and trying to channel it all. Yeah. I'm trying to calm down now, so I don't know if that means somebody else has some energy, or I've passed the energy on to someone. I don't know who's got the energy now. I don't know if I'm losing my voice a bit.
I'm just so happy that this dialogue is happening. And I thank you, Joe, for introducing me to some of the people who are doing great work in this sphere of where we are just saying there has to be more to life than, getting mental health disorders that, the diagnosis changes every so often, and there seems to be no end to it. I often used to say, if somebody has the ability to hear something that I cannot hear, or to see something that I cannot see, then they have an edge over me, not that they are, below me because they're different. They actually, how come my eyes cannot see it? So because we have labeled them as sick or less than for so long, the minute they start to recognize that ability, then they get into a place of fear. They get into a place of frustration, like, why me? Leave me alone. Like, I do not want to have this. And the more frustrated they get, the more they start to pick up on, because when they're frustrated, they start to pick up on negative vibes.
And then they start at a lower frequency, and it sort of perpetuates
so
that
then
lower.
It just confirms to them that there's something really, really wrong with them. By the time we see them, they are spiraling downwards, and we also say, yes, indeed, there's something wrong with them. Some of the healers that I've spoken to, and it's so hard here because nobody speaks. I will tell you that in the last few weeks, I have actually gone to a traditional healer who works with it's so funny to even say, who works with spirits. And I've sat in this room, they have come in, and it's like the most amazing thing, because the love that I feel, I've been twice, the love that I feel when I speak to them. I'm always like, we're in a totally, completely dark room, but this could easily be my grandmother, because she's so gentle and so sweet when she speaks, when she's, giving advice and things like, she's just so gentle. And I'm like, wow. I'm always like, am I actually in this space? But everyone says,
love. You can just have that harmonious energy.
Exactly. And every time I come out,
presence, and you absorb all that goodness and all that richness, and then you channel that with other people.
Because of who I am, and the color of my hair, they always think, cover your hair. We don't want anyone to recognize you. And so I keep saying, it's so sad that you people who know, and I'm referring to the people who are practicing this. It's so sad that what is right, what is good for us, that you're healing people and you're helping people, and yet you have to hide. When you come out of this place, all of you are pretending, and all of you will sit with everyone else who is, abusing this practice.
It's true. It's true that the people who know the most on an intuitive level, and they see and they've got aware of everything. They've almost got to hold that space for the people who are ignorant or trying to control things.
Yes.
Who have a very small understanding, as if they're the experts and they're in charge doing everything. And then you have to almost wait for them. You have to send them love and non-judgmental acceptance.
Yes.
And then they step, like what Johnny was saying, it's like, if you've got to wait for them or allow them to be ready. And then when you get those moments, that's the opportunity to sort of reach out or connect with that person in a mutual way. But it's almost like not trying to force it or letting them force themselves upon you, sort of thing, which I find incredibly hard.
The beautiful thing is that when they wake up, they will go from 0 to 100 in just a few days. because it's like the pieces of the puzzle just come together so quickly when we hold space. So when they finally wake up, you know, it makes sense so quickly. So we just have to continue.
Holding space.
Once we've found our tribes, we continue speaking, encouraging each other, supporting each other as the tribe grows.
Wow, yeah, because that's why what I wanted to get. I wanted to get the same together in Brighton again, because they used to have a support group called Spiritual Crisis Network support groups. So people like Johnny was mentioning about who have like an explosion, and then they wash away of all the nonsense and everything. And then literally, when you meet these group of people from Spiritual Crisis Networks, the people who have had that explosion, you can just connect with them on this ridiculously high frequency. And you can almost think about that person, and then they'd like walk across and say hello to you or something, like when they weren't even around. Like you're walking around the street, and then you say something, and they're like, "Oh, hi, John. Oh, I was just thinking about you." And then you sort of imagine something, and then it happens, and then they do something, and it's just so amazing. Like even with what colour t-shirt they're wearing or what the time is, and you facilitate that higher state with each other. Because I don't know how spiritual awakening works, but for me, it's always through connecting with other people. They facilitate my process, and you just keep bouncing off each other. And the more you keep bouncing, you go higher and higher and higher. And then you just like this massive aura of love that you're like resonate with, this loving presence. And it's just like so, I don't know if it's like an addictive, or I don't know if that's the right word, but it's like it's so I don't know. It's just so like once you get involved in it, all addiction.
It completely sucks you in.
It sucks you in completely. Like it's almost like saying I don't know, like you've had a McDonald's or something, and then you've had like a meal at a restaurant, and you're like, well, I've had this meal at the restaurant. This is the taste is the loveliest food. I could never go back to McDonald's or Burger King ever again, because it just takes your, it's nothing can compare to it. And once you experience that like once or twice, and you're really, it's almost like if you're an addict, it's like you're seeking that connection so badly, but there's just something that's holding you back, and then you hit rock bottom, and then you're free. You're just free of all of it, because you're connected with something greater than yourself, whereas before you just couldn't do it for some reason.
Yeah.
But,
wow, you're going. Sorry.
Can I just? I was just to the last thing you're saying, Joe. Like this, you know, what can I say? Like, and the more you lose, the more you get. Like what you are talking about. Like this ability to be free, this ability to be open. Like you have to let go of so many things. Like you have to let go of concept and ideas, and like we are so full of it that we are like totally, like we are just one fucking library. Everybody, and we don't know the fuck how to live.
You're not talking about my talk, are you, Johnny?
No, not.
I do waffle load. I do. I probably need to slow it down.
Yeah.
You've got it right, definitely. Yeah. That's just me saying like I'm basically saying like there's nothing that's important. It is important, but it's not important. Trying to see from both sides. Yeah. That trying to say like nothing matters, but everything matters. But then it's not you doing it; it's something that's working through you. That if it's the right moment at the right time in the right place, it'll come together. If what your intention is right.
Yeah, and also you know there are, maybe not for all, but for a lot of people there are a lot of pain included in this process, like in the awakening, or what you should call it. Like when you have to let go of, like all, let's say many of those things that you was talking about, when you have to let go of those concepts, like it can be really scary. like because you believe you are this, like you are thinking it, you are living it,
That's
like
true. That's
the
true.
society is like this. And then when you wake up to yourself, you wake up to reality, to life itself, then it's like different. When you are free, you you have to let go, and it can be really scary, and it can make you very alone. It can
Yeah, yeah,
really
it's
make,
huge, huge.
yeah. So
That's really hard. The loneliness, isn't it? It's that real. It's something that you have all this. What's really peculiar about it, Johnny? What I've experienced it. I'm no sort of expert. I can be really arrogant about it sometimes with people to get my point across. But what's really weird is how you can feel so connected with people or understanding so deeply, yet you're completely on your own. There's such a paradox, isn't it? Like that you have that solitude that you have to be on your own to somehow. I don't know. There's something about being alone. Like I don't know, someone you have to have that space somehow to reflect. Because if you're not reflecting and being alone, you're somehow. Oh, sorry.
Joe.
Yeah.
So I was going to say the being alone, I struggled with it as well, but then I also knew that it was time to stop listening to the outside and then start building that absolute trust with
That's what it is. You're
yourself.
so right. That's so intelligent.
Because your all the awakening happens to only you. And that's why you realize nothing is the way you thought it was. So either the universe will basically make sure either you fight with people or whatever, people will leave you.
True. That's so true.
And when they leave you, that also aids the process of hitting rock bottom. It just, you feel so alone, and then you surrender. Once you surrender, then you start to see
that's true.
in a different
and then the universe will say, yep, Joe, yep,
yes,
Jerry.
now you're ready. When you
got
surrender, then exactly. So that's why it's so important to actually be alone. And when I find someone else who's struggling, I say, listen, you take every moment that you are alone as a blessing right now, because when you come out of this, you will absolutely trust what your spirit is telling you. And no matter what anyone says, people used to ask me, how do you know this? I say, because my spirit told me. And they'll say, you're crazy. And I'll say, I know without a shadow of a doubt. Because every time I went in that space, when I questioned something, even just a fleeting thought of a question, the answer came. The answer came in a conversation. The answer came in a WhatsApp group that was discussing something completely different. The answer came, I would open YouTube. YouTube was the craziest, because I would open YouTube and a most random video.
It comes where you don't expect it. It comes.
Yes,
the one place you're expecting it to come. It goes.
Exactly.
It confuses you, and like you think, oh, this is saying I wasn't. It's like to just make you trust. Like you can't control it. It'll happen at the right time when it feels right. If you trust and you trust yourself. It's really weird. It's almost like people think it's about putting trust in the universe, but I think it's a more reciprocal relationship. It's more that you're participating, like you're trusting yourself at the same time as trusting the universe. And that's what the mutuality is. And sometimes in the West, I feel we get it wrong. Like you either trust the universe completely, or you trust yourself completely, and then it almost becomes almost egotistical or more arrogant, because you're like, well, it's completely me, or it's completely the universe. Like I'm completely humble, and
that's when you realize that we are the universe, because it's one and the same. If I trust me completely, then I trust the universe as well. So it's really amazing. It comes with a lot of pain, but then also you can imagine the pain of waking up. When we go to sleep, it's beautiful, you rest. It does not matter how it happens. When it's time to wake up, there's discomfort. Like, I would rather stay in my bed a little longer, or I'm just so relaxed now, getting out of bed feels painful. There's discomfort in any waking up. So that's what happens to us as well.
Because there's some really weird processes. Like, for example, today, I didn't go to bed, so I had a couple of hours sleep in the afternoon. But for some reason, I felt I needed to not sleep and feel really rough and groggy, because if I did that, then I wouldn't prepare and be all, like do what, like Johnny says, like go through my library, read everything, and be like very structured and rule bound. Whereas because I was tired and I could just like let go more and just listen to music.
Yes.
And then just sort of just whatever I'm feeling, let it just flood out.
Yep.
I think we've got like 13 minutes. I'm wondering if I could nudge anyone else or anything. So I don't know if I'm being a bully if I try to like pull people in, because I was thinking like with Jeff, I'm sure if it's okay to talk to Jeff, like I'm sure you're reading a book at the moment that resonates a lot with what Jerry was saying about people who when they understand things or they're more attuned to things, but then they don't trust it in non-ordinary states of consciousness. I'm sure you're reading a book that was really resonant with that. Well, I don't know if I'm being too pushy, so I'll let people go at their own pace, sort of thing. But there's I just pick on these little clues or connections with people, which I think is really exciting. And there's someone called Terry as well. But hi, Terry. I've only just noticed you in the chat box as well. So he's joined us, because one Jeff's dropped out, and then I've noticed Terry's there, sort of filling the space, the connection. Like when someone comes, another person goes. Yeah. Okay, that's okay. That's okay. You prefer not to talk. I don't know if I do too much talking. Like if someone needs to, like, I think Jerry says someone who will tell me and like be very firm, I think, if need be. Can we get the recording? Yeah, definitely. So I'm recording it now. Where do you want me to send it? Do you want my email? Do you want me to put it in the chat box? You can email me and I can email you back, or on Facebook. What's better for you or for everybody? What would be most effective? Oh, chat here. I'll send my email in the chat box, and then Jeff's come at the right time as well. So just so I mentioned about messaging someone, Jeff's ready to give us a message at the right time. Okay. I don't know if Jeff would take his mic off, and I'll switch my mic off, and Jeff can take charge, because Jeff might be my spiritual father today.
You're muted, Joe.
I was just saying, you're my spiritual father for today, and you've been carrying my back with all my problems at the moment, supporting me, and you come in at the right time when I need you. So I'll be writing the email, and then you'll say something really profound or connecting at the right moment.
I definitely can echo, the stuff Geraldine was talking about fits right on. I've seen stuff happen pretty fast. And anyway, I'm really about safe spaces for processing this stuff is what I'd like to focus on. And then my theme for this whole year is paradox is fundamental. Just we get these conflicting things, and our linear logic wants everything to make sense. But Gödel and Turing and decidability tell us things can't be reduced to anything that simple. Some things are, the majority of everything is non-computable, non-decidable, not that simple as we would like to make it with our linear processing. And so it's really, really important to be comfortable with paradox. And we get conflicting signals and we get conflicting points of view, and I feel it's really important to be able to sit with that without freaking out. And that's where a lot of our stuff comes to play. That goes badly, is people just can't handle that idea of there isn't this absolute truth. I don't have this absolute truth that's gonna be the answer to everything, other than if that absolute truth is there is no absolute truth. I don't know, something in that territory.
Oh, I love that. It sounds like you're basically the person who I'm supposed to be reading a book about, but I keep being lazy and I'm putting off about it. Is it Chiang Tzu? That he's all about paradox, the Taoist. He sits with that paradox, and he sort of sits with it, and then if people want to take it, they take it. If they don't, they don't. So do you sort of almost speak in riddles? It's almost like, because you can't convey it in a linear way. It's almost like you have a bundle of, like, I don't know, a bundle of knots, and then it's almost like you're trying to hand those knots over, but then you can't untie it yourself. I don't know. There's something there that you have by doing the paradox. It becomes a shared process. Whereas if it's linear, it becomes a monologue where you're creating dialogue through being paradoxical. Everything's interconnected if you communicate in paradox.
Well, linear. I mean, language is a linear process, and all you have to say, you could just create the sentence, this statement is not true, to create, I mean, just that self-referentiality in the linear process can create a paradox very easily. Because as soon as you say this statement is not true, you've defined, I mean, if it's true, then it's false. And if it's,
Oh, so that's what you do, Jeff. That's what your genius is about.
it's
Your
a simple.
You say it's simple, but it sounds like the hardest thing to do. Like, you're basically saying to someone, you're saying, it's like almost being a magician or something. You're saying, like, I'm gonna encourage you to say this is true, and it's not true at the same time, and then you'll drop it. It's like a koan, like a Zen koan.
And it's just, I mean, my background, a lot of it's in fluid mechanics, and I played around with vortex fields and nonlinear systems, and they just get messy, and you can't just pull an absolute truth out of things. And I think that says something about our fundamental reality. So
That's what's so weird though, Jeff, because you're basically talking about something so ridiculously complex you can't put a label or a name on it. But then at the same time, you're saying, but it's really simple. You've done a paradox again. Like, you're talking about the microcosm and the macrocosm. You're doing something. You're reconciling the complex and the simple at the same time.
I mean, just if you consider how dolphins swim, and how you need, the real world is a non-linear system whenever you get it, and we've evolved to navigate non-linear systems and take advantage of them.
So that's what you're doing then, Jeff.
Where-
You're validating someone on an experiential level and on a conceptual level. You're communicating on different energy frequencies. So you're talking to someone on a conscious level, and then you're also you're communicating on a subconscious level to them. So sometimes you're probably communicating a lot subconsciously, and they're not even aware of it because their conscious mind isn't picking up. And then when you've basically shown that care and that love on an implicit level, then they're ready to consciously consolidate it at the last moment. But you're doing all that work underneath it, which is so complicated, like all your work and your background, and you're doing all this really challenging work, and then the icing on the cake is the simple thing, and it looks simple, but it isn't. It is, but it isn't.
Yeah, it doesn't. And one of my favorite people in psychology is John Bowlby, and who defined attachment theory and how we feel safe in the world. And my background in controls engineering has me thinking that there's this attachment system that we haven't really very well, that basically is how we survive. I mean, it's built into our evolutionary history.
Wow. You're a secure base. You're basically working at on a sort of implicit level. You're saying how do we have a strong foundation as a secure base? We can establish one, but it's to do with like semiotics and signs and sensations. It's not something you can conceptualize. It's something you do behind the scenes. You're doing it all and you're constructing it, and then you're laying the foundations as a visionary or a secure base.
Well, I'm saying that system is at play underlying everything that we do through an individuation path. And so This part, the part at the stage where it gets classified as a spiritual experience is actually a shift in that attachment system to the collective, to the universe, to, I mean, and it's a reorienting from self to collective in that point of view.
And when you say it, Jeff, are you actually discovering it, or are you constructing it? Because I wonder if you're co-constructing it.
It's everything's a work in progress process. I don't know. Not sure what you mean by that exactly.
Because I wonder if your work, what you're doing, it's got something to do with oh, do you have my face? I don't know if I should have my face. I'm trying not to be so intense, sort of thing. Like, we've got the same hairstyle as well. Look, we've got short hair as well, facial hair, father and son. Yeah, and I suppose what I'm trying to say is it's something to do with like, are you constructing something? Like, is it saying is it, or do you wash all the nonsense and rubbish away, like Johnny was saying, like you wash it all away, and then you discover what is all connected and all the foundations of attachment from the individual to the collective? Or is it something you've got to envision, you've got to see it, what it is, and then you create it with your vision as a co-creation? It's there, but it's not there. And by you living and acting in an authentic way, it becomes real. The more you trust it and the more you believe in it, it actually happens. Like, it's almost like saying, oh, I'm going to build a house, I'm going to build a swimming pool, it's going to happen. Or like the field of dreams, it's like, if you build it, they will come. And if you trust it, it all comes together.
There's a territory that we're exploring here that seems to, and it seems to be a unified territory that lots of people have traversed in different trajectories, and everybody who's done it seems like they try to make a map of that territory.
Wow. And I feel like we're just coming in there. Yeah, sorry. We're just coming near the end. I just realised that's why you're here today, Jeff. Because basically we're talking about all these things about deconstruct. I've been talking about wanting to deconstruct, dismantle the things that don't work, and then people like Jerry and Margie are talking about being with the community, with the ancestors and nature and the earth, and then like Johnny's talking from his own experience of how the process works, from a lived experience of 6 or 7 years, what it's really like. And then it sounds like you're saying, okay, well, this is where we're headed. This is where we need to bring technology, engineering, community, services. How do we all bring it all together? And that's why you're finishing this talk, because you're the future, where we're headed.
Yeah, and I've put together a map for myself from a Taoist foundation that satisfies my need for a map, but that's not. But it's always a work in progress, and the map that I've got is very well defined.
I know who you need to talk to. Maybe I need to send you I'll send you his email. There's a guy called, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a friend of Gino Hughes, who does consciousness-based studies in Asia, and he's got a rival or a friend or whatever in the US called Daniel. What's his name? Ingram, yeah. And he loves maps. He just loves maps of consciousness and spiritual awakening. So you've got to contact him and tell him about this, because he'll be licking his lips thinking, wow, this is the next thing. This is the next big thing. This is where we're headed. And I think if you touch base with him, he'd just really get it completely.
In the interconnectedness of things, I've spent quite a bit of time with both of those people in person.
Wow, so they're on your page. So basically, they're both international. Look, I was talking about going from being a nationalist to being an internationalist, and you're sort of, what do you call it, hobnobbing with the internationalist visionaries of consciousness studies and spirituality and science. So basically, if scientific and medical network are watching this, they need to talk to Jeff Beck, Gino Yu and Daniel Ingram and have them on a discussion panel of where consciousness-based research needs to be headed in a scientific and spiritual way. What do you think, Jeff?
Sure.
Sure. So I don't know if you could say like David Lorimer from Scientific Medical Network. If you're hearing this, can you invite me and Gino and Daniel to do a panel discussion?
Sure.
Sorry, I don't know if I'm being too pushy. Sorry. I mean, I'm saying that. Sorry, I'm saying that. Okay. Yeah.
My recent history dealing with interfacing with this current system is, it seems to me, it's like there's this dual battle between psychology,
Mm-hmm.
the way that's embodied currently, and psychiatry, which is more pharmaceutical
Wow,
based.
you're so smart, Jeff. You're so smart because you're basically talking about what Gino's doing and what Daniel's doing and how to integrate the two. Because Daniel's more involved. I think he's a psychiatrist or a medical physician. That's
Yeah,
his background, and he's more involved in he wants to do mainstream psychiatry and mental health services. Whereas I think Gino's more of a maverick in that he wants to be completely outside of that and be more involved in terms of technology and consciousness and enhancing the potential of social media and all that kind of stuff.
And what I find sorely missing in the process is our current understanding from mathematics and information processing, adaptive filtering, AI. I think what we've learned about that in the last
Wow.
century is sorely missing in the process.
Wow. So what says to me what you're saying, Jeff? I don't know if I interrupted you. I'm getting on his side. Is basically you're talking about the US and Asia or China or was it Hong Kong where Gino's from? You're bridging a relationship between the two. And my TV's just turned back on, so that means like that sounds right to me. They're saying about the relationship between because there's Asia like China and India are going to be superpowers now. US aren't going to be as powerful and dominant. It's going to be more mutual with those nations. So you're bridging the gap between Asia and the West. It sounds to me you're bridging the gap.
Well, anyway, it's really about how we map the territory and what that means and so.
Wow. So you're mapping the territory between the two to break down those divisions and divides. Wow. Oh, I don't know if we should end now. I don't know how everyone else feels about it because we're running over like by 5 minutes. Is that okay place for everybody to stop and finish? And if they need any emails or anything, I'm partly thinking that Margie and Geraldine should share emails between each other if that's okay for me to share your emails or if you want to. And then also Johnny, I can send a message about Sperry Andrews if he's interested, like one of our old videos and some of his work. And then Terry's got my email, so if you want to do something, that's absolutely fine. And if you want to find anything about Scientific Medical Network, they've got a website and they've got events coming up. And there's one I actually organised for October on connections, visionary leadership and community. So it actually expands on what we're talking about here. So that's late October. I think the 24th of I think it's probably the 24th of October, I think it is, or late October. And if you check the website, you could go to that as well. And that will be with Steve Taylor, Zelda Hall, and Mick Collins. Yeah. Okay, so that's everybody. Brilliant. Well, thanks, Jeff. I really love the way you finished that off. Definitely. Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording. Yeah, well, thank you, Johnny. Wow, you gave so much. God, like a lot. Like it's almost like 7 years of struggle and adversity, and you're bringing it all here to share with us today. And that takes a lot of guts, definitely. I'm really appreciative of that, definitely. But a really amazing group, thanks. So what I'll do is I'll stop the recording and then I'll say bye to everyone. I don't know if everyone wants to turn the cameras off and on and then say bye just as we stop it all. I don't know.